What happened in those last few years before 1947? The Quit India movement of Mahatma Gandhi had died out completely by 1944, and there was nothing left in the Indian situation which made it necessary for the British to evacuate India in a hurry. Why then did they leave? The actual story, it seems, still remains untold to the common man.
Subhas was born into the family of a wealthy Indian lawyer in Bengal. He was sent to a British school, as his father considered himself a loyal supporter of the British Raj. The British had been the colonial masters of the Indian subcontinent for more than a century. Bringing unity and stability to the country, they ruled with the consent of India's governing classes. One day Subhas might become an officer under British command. Subhas entered Presidency College. Subhas passed his exams with flying colours. In 1919 he enrolled at Cambridge University in England to prepare for entry into the Indian Civil Service, the ICS. After only 8 months of study, Subhas passed the extremely difficult Indian Civil Service exam. To his surprise, he was the 4th best in his year. It threw him into a personal crisis.
Does he want to be a servant of the British Raj? After he thinks about it for a while, he says no. The British, they're not thrilled that one of the top candidates would drop out, so they say, please reconsider, you don't know what you're giving up. And he says no.
Bose returned to India to begin a career as a politician, helped by the reputation of his Cambridge degree and by his family connections. The Calcutta region was prone to flooding. Poverty was endemic. Bose organised famine relief in eastern Bengal, impressing Indians and the British alike. But it was Bose's fervent nationalism that didn't go down well with the British colonial authorities. He soon organised protests and strikes against British rule. His declared goal was to kick the British out of India. There were even rumours that he had links with Bengali terrorists. It didn't take long until he was arrested. Time and again over the next 10 years, Bose was locked up for his anti-British activities. In prison, his health declined. To avoid turning him into a martyr, he was released into the care of his family. The precondition was that he left India for a lengthy period of time. In 1933, he boarded a ship to Europe. His destination was Austria, where he was diagnosed as having a stone in his gallbladder. After an operation, Bose's health gradually improved. As he couldn't be in India, he would continue his struggle on the international stage.
He calls himself, during this European period, ambassador of India in bondage. He wants Europeans, non-British, to support the efforts of India to obtain independence from the British Empire.
Writing his autobiography, he hired a young Austrian woman, Emilia Schenkel, as his secretary. The two fell in love and got married.
One thing attracted my father, that basically she was a rather self-assured woman. She found him very attractive, very charming. He was one of the people who, of course, always wanted wanted women to play a strong role, and that, of course, was an exceedingly unusual attitude for a man at that time, even more so than what it is today.
In India, there are many reminders of Bose's travels in the German-speaking world. It's made him hugely popular among the Indian young. Back in 1933, Anita's father was heading from Vienna to Berlin. It was the beginning of the most controversial aspect of the Indian nationalist's life. He'd come to meet the Nazis who'd recently taken over power. Bose was impressed by the supposed efficiency of the Nazi regime. He told others that he wanted a combination of socialist ideals and fascist discipline for India. Bose held meetings with Nazi officials. He wanted Germany's political support for Indian independence and asked for a meeting with the Führer himself.
I'm proud of my father because he was a man of great integrity. I think he must have been a very magnetic person. And those people who even saw him at a distance themselves, I had heard many incidents that they said, well, I just saw him from a distance and he looked at me and it made a difference to my life.
But there was someone who was even more popular than Bose.
Mahatma Gandhi is absolutely unique. Gandhi says the means are as important as the ends. If you have a goal and you use corrupt means, you use violent means to achieve it, you contaminate the goal that you seek.
Even though Subhas believed that the use of violence against the British was legitimate, Gandhi brought him into the mainstream of the Indian nationalist movement. He even ensured that Bose was elected president of the Indian National Congress Party.
Now, about Gandhi, you have to remember, although he sounds like a saint, he's a politician. He's a master of raising money. He's a master of propaganda. He's a master of choosing men who will help him.
But Bose became disillusioned with the lack of zeal amongst Congress leaders, like Jawaharlal Nehru, Gandhi's favorite political protege. Subhas publicly advocated the use of violence against the British.
India is going to be free. Our struggle is no doubt a non-violent struggle. But even a non-violent struggle demands an army, an organization, and a machinery.
Gandhi was shocked, and Bose was forced to resign. He rallied the radical Indian left around him and set up a new political party, the Forward Bloc. But events a long way from India were working against him.
Angriff auf London nimmt seinen Anfang.
Britain was under attack by Nazi Germany. In August 1940, German bombers were flying raids against London. There was widespread talk of an imminent invasion. Britain's ultra-conservative new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, advocated a tough hand in India, while the war in Europe was threatening the survival of Britain as an independent nation. Now wasn't the time to go soft on Indian nationalists.
Churchill is a great war leader for Great Britain and a disaster for India. He is hated in India.
Bose and his followers were arrested. The Forward Bloc movement came to a halt.
Bose had undertaken a hunger strike in prison, and the British did not want him to die on their hands, and so had allowed him to go home with the intention of rearresting him as soon as he regained his health.
But Bose managed to escape. In disguise, he headed north. He then walked across the border into Afghanistan. His life was in great danger, as newly discovered documents prove.
From London, an order went out to the Special Operations Executive in Istanbul and Cairo that they should wire what arrangements they could make for Subhas Chandra Bose's assassination. Clearly, the British saw him as their most resourceful and inveterate opponent, and during the war, they were prepared to go to any lengths to stop him.
Afghanistan was the playground of the world's intelligence services. Everywhere Bose had to suspect a British agent. His cover was about to be blown when he received an exit visa. Bose boarded a train and headed north. His first stop was Moscow.
Bose was always very much impressed by the Soviet Union, by Lenin, even by Stalin, and he was always interested to get the kind of relationship with the Soviet politicians.
But Stalin didn't trust the Indian nationalist. He feared that Bose might be a British agent. Subhas only received a transit visa and was forced to continue his journey. His final destination was Germany, which had a non-aggression treaty with the Soviet Union. The political situation had changed fundamentally since his last visit to Berlin. The Nazis were at the height of their power, the masters of Western and Central Europe. Bose wanted to enlist their help in his struggle for Indian independence.
In the early 40s, he felt that the old imperialisms of the British and the French and the Dutch were in conflict with the new imperialisms of Germany, Japan, and Italy. And the colonized countries of Asia might as well take advantage of that conflict to press for their own freedom.
Within 6 days of his arrival in Berlin, Bose requested Germany and Italy to make statements in support of Indian independence. He also demanded money and military aid. But Bose's memorandum to the German government met with polite silence. On the 22nd of June 1941, the German Wehrmacht attacked the Soviet Union. Bose was shocked. He'd always seen Russia as another natural ally in his fight against Britain. But the German attack on the Soviet Union offered new opportunities. Hitler had ordered that once Russia had fallen, the Wehrmacht would continue its advance all the way to India. Suddenly, Bose was of interest to the Germans. They agreed to support him with money and gave him diplomatic status. Bose assumed the title of Netaji, which means leader or Führer. He received an office and an organization, the Free India Center, with a staff of more than 30 people. Bose's first task was to broadcast anti-British propaganda to India. With his new title of Netaji, he addressed his followers back at home.
When he started his speech, Ami Subhas, I'm Subhas, tears started rolling from the eyes of his mother.
Bose wanted to reach the 2 million Indian volunteers of the British Indian Army. These men were the bedrock of the British Raj.
He believed that Britain's Indian Army was the ultimate instrument of colonial control, not just in India, but in the British Empire worldwide. And therefore he set out to undermine the loyalty of Indian soldiers to the King Emperor and replace it with a new allegiance to the Indian nation.
It was on the battlefields of North Africa that Bose's propaganda activities were most dangerous to the British. Here, thousands of Indian soldiers were fighting alongside British troops against the Nazis. In 1941, the Germans had the upper hand. 32,000 British and Commonwealth troops were taken prisoner. Among them were 10,000 Indians. From his new offices in Berlin, where Bose had been joined by his Austrian wife Emilia, the Netaji kept a close eye on these developments. His focus was on the sleepy German town of Annaburg, south of Berlin. During the war, it was the arrival point for the nearby POW camp of Königsbrück. In the autumn of 1941, the first detachment of British Indian prisoners arrived here by train. They'd been specially separated from their British comrades. Bose soon paid the camp a visit. The Netaji proposed that the Indian POWs should join a special Indian legion within the Wehrmacht, loyal to himself and to Adolf Hitler.
My husband accompanied them as an interpreter, and he explained that the Sikhs, the ones with the turbans, it was always very difficult to convince them. They always started talking about the salt. We eat English salt, and we swore an oath to them. Bose didn't react angrily. He said, I understand that, but it's your land you're working for. Your land needs to be free, and everything we can do, we're doing it for ourselves. And the Sikhs accepted that.
A total of 3,500 Indian soldiers signed up. Though part of the Wehrmacht, their goal was the liberation of India.
We thought, okay, they're different. And maybe they're not what you expect from a German soldier either. But that's why they're Indians. We have to accept that.
The Indian soldiers who marched through Königsbrück left their songs here, their tunes.
Das ging dann so, Jimbadau, Agidau, Milkosa Devi, Margidau, Margidau, Linking Shumsi.
Ageau, Kadambarau, Milkosa Devi. Also,
onward with a determined stride, all joined together.
Alle zusammengeschlossen.
And now comes the interesting part. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs and Christians, all brothers to one another. And that was the point. We wanted to have a community for the future of India. And we were successful.
Am hohen Drahtzaun standen slim, handsome men stood at the tall chain link fence with turbans, very exotic. For us, it was something right out of Aladdin or 1001 Nights. Yes, we were attracted to them somehow. I saw all the Indians, and they all appealed to me. They were really very, very smart soldiers. I don't know if smart is the right word, but they were very well-dressed soldiers. They had very nice uniforms, and they were always immaculately dressed. All the girls lusted after the Indians at the time. Me too.
England immer nur als der Streiter der Wahrheit, der Gerechtigkeit, der Vorkämpfer aller Tugenden auftrat. Das hat Gott den Engländern nicht vergessen. Dafür sind sie reich gesegnet worden. Sie haben in 300 Jahren rund 40 Millionen Quadratkilometer Erdraum sich unterworfen. Alles natürlich nicht etwa aus Egoismus, nicht etwa aus irgendeiner Lust an der Herrschaft oder am Reichtum oder am Genuss. Nein, im Gegenteil, alles das tat man nur im Auftrage Gottes und der guten und lieben Religion zuliebe. Freilich, England wollte auch nicht einmal allein nur Streiter Gottes sein, sondern es hat immer auch andere dann eingeladen, an diesem edlen Streit teilzunehmen. Es hat nicht sich gerade bemüht, die Hauptlast zu tragen, sondern für so Gott wohlgefällige Werke, da kann man auch immer Mitkämpfer suchen. Das tun sie auch heute. Und es hat sich das, wie gesagt, für England reich bezahlt gemacht. 40 Millionen Quadratkilometer und die englische Geschichte ist eine einzige Reihenfolge von Vergewaltigungen, von Erpressungen, von tyrannischen Misshandlungen, von Unterdrückungen, von Ausplünderungen. Es gibt Dinge, die wirklich in keinem anderen Staat unter keinem anderen Volk denkbar gewesen wären. Man hat für alles Krieg geführt. Man führte Krieg, um seinen Handel zu erweitern. Man führte Krieg, um andere zu veranlassen, dass sie Opium rauchten. Man führte aber auch Krieg, wenn notwendig, um Goldgruben zu gewinnen, um die Herrschaft über Diamantengruben zu bekommen. Es waren immer materielle Ziele, allerdings immer naturgemäß edel und ideal verbrennt, auch der letzte Krieg. Ohne sich jemals um die Meinung von Eingeborenen zu kümmern, haben sie Kontinente mit blutiger Gewalt unterworfen. Durch Flugzeuge, Bomben in den eigenen Kolonien die Eingeborenen zur Raison zu bringen. Die lieben, farbigen Mitbürger zu zwingen, die ihnen verhasste Fremdherrschaft weiterzudulden. ...300 Jahre lang vor dem hat England allmählich sein sogenanntes Weltreich gebildet. Nicht gebildet durch den freien Willen oder durch die übereinstimmenden Kundgebungen der Absicht oder Anschauungen der Betroffenen, sondern 300 Jahre lang ist dieses Weltreich zusammengeschmiedet worden, nur durch Gewalt. Krieg um Krieg wurde geführt, Volk um Volk wurde seiner Freiheit beraubt, Staat um Staat wurde zerbrochen, um endlich dieses Gebilde zu schaffen, das die britische Imperium heißt. Dabei war die Demokratie überall nur eine reine Maske. Hinter der Demokratie steht in Wirklichkeit die Völkerbeherrschung im Großen und die Menschenunterdrückung und Knebelung im Einzelnen. Dieser Staat kann es heute nicht wagen, seine Glieder wirklich abstimmen zu lassen, und die jetzt nach jahrhundertelanger Bearbeitung etwa bereit wären, freiwillig Glieder dieser Weltgemeinschaft zu sein. Im Gegenteil, ägyptische Nationalisten, indische Nationalisten, sie wandern zu Tausenden in die Kerker und in die Gefängnisse. Konzentrationslager sind nicht in Deutschland erfunden worden, sondern Engländer sind die genialen Erfinder dieser Idee. Es ist das wichtig, meine Volksgenossen, dass wir das immer wieder in die Welt hinausreihen, weil unverschämte demokratische Lügner auftreten und behaupten, die sogenannten autoritären Staaten wollten die Welt erobern, während in Wirklichkeit die Welteroberer unsere alten Feinde sind. England ist zunächst und im Inneren, trotz seiner Welteroberung, der sozial rückständigste Staat, den es wohl in Europa gibt. Ein Staat, dessen gesamte Ausrichtung nach den Interessen einer verhältnismäßig kleinen und dünnen Oberschicht erfolgt. und der mit dieser Oberschicht des verbündeten jüdischen Genossenschaft. Die Interessen der breiten Massen spielen bei der Ausrichtung dieses Staates überhaupt keine Rolle. Man redet von Freiheit, man redet von Demokratie, man redet von den Errungenschaften eines liberalen Systems und versteht darunter doch nichts anderes als die Stabilisierung des Regimes einer Gesellschaftsschichte, die es möglich macht, dank ihrem Kapital die Presse in ihre Hand zu bekommen und zu organisieren und zu dirigieren und damit die öffentliche Meinung zu bilden. Das Land, das für einzelne wenige ein Paradies ist für viele, das heißt für die Masse in Wirklichkeit, nur ein laufendes Elend. Elend in der Ernährung, Elend in der Kleidung, Elend vor allem in der Wohnung, Elend in der Sicherheit des Verdienstes, Elend in der gesamten sozialen Gesetzgebung. Das Jahr 1941 wird, dessen bin ich überzeugt, das geschichtliche Jahr einer großen Neuordnung Europas sein. Das Programm kann kein anderes sein als Erschließung der Welt für alle, Brechung der Vorrechte Einzelner, Brechung der Tyrannei, gewisser Völker und besser noch ihrer finanziellen Machthaber. Und endlich wird dieses Jahr mithelfen, dann wirklich die Grundlagen für eine Völkerverständigung und damit eine Völkeraufstellung zu sichern. Schon jetzt aber sehen wir, wie unsere Rassenerkenntnis Volk um Volk ergreift. Und ich hoffe, dass auch die Völker, die heute noch in Feindschaft gegen uns stehen, eines Tages ihren größeren inneren Feind erkennen werden und dass sie dann doch noch in eine große gemeinsame Front mit uns eintreten werden. Der Front einer arischen Menschheit gegenüber der internationalen jüdischen Ausbeutung und Völkerverderben.
Bose's Indian Legion appeared in a Nazi newsreel. But the Wehrmacht's war against Russia wasn't going well. The chances of reaching India were slim. Bose was looking for new allies. The Japanese were much closer to India than the Germans. After its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan had entered the war on Germany's side. Sweeping down the Malay Peninsula, the Japanese had caught the British forces in Southeast Asia napping. The British garrison in Singapore was forced to surrender. Winston Churchill called it the biggest defeat in British history. Among the 130,000 Allied prisoners were tens of thousands of Indians. Back in Berlin, Bose visited the Japanese embassy to offer his services. He'd set up an Indian Legion in Germany and wanted to do the same in Southeast Asia, together with the Japanese. It was agreed that he would make his way to Japan as soon as possible. But first Bose travelled to the German military headquarters in East Prussia to meet the man he'd been chasing for years. Bose's prestige in Germany was at a high. He wanted to convince the Führer to give his public support for Indian independence. Their handshake was captured on camera. Back in Berlin, the Netaji was getting impatient. It would be months before a U-boat was available for his trip to Japan. Bose used the time to hold an international conference on India. It introduced a piece of music that would later become India's national anthem.
Den Kampf bis zum Siege weiterzuführen, zu bekräftigen. In diesem Kampf, der für Indien ein Kampf Sein oder Nichtsein ist, kann es nur einen Ausgang geben, unseren gemeinsamen Sieg. Lang leben die drei Paktmächte und ihre Verbündeten. Lang lebe das freie Indien.
Da hat große Pläne entwickelt. Das ging ja über
He had great plans, beyond new stamps and coins for India. He had ideas on the postal system. He had ideas on how to organize the police. In the opinion of German observers, he was so advanced in his thinking that if India had become independent, he could have implemented his ideas for a new government immediately.
Staatsführung und der Regierung hätte umsetzen können.
Bose considered the German police to be the perfect model for an independent India. He even managed to get an appointment with the Nazis' leading police expert. It was Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer of the SS. Heinrich Himmler made Bose feel extremely welcome.
Heinrich Himmler hatte sich jahrelang mit Indien beschäftigt.
Heinrich Himmler had been preoccupied with India for years. He knew about Indian culture, about Indian literature like Shakuntala, etc., and he was interested in learning more about India under British rule, politically and economically.
Unter britischer Herrschaft jetzt stand, zu erfahren.
In 1938, Himmler had even sent an expedition of SS scientists to Tibet, believing it to be the original heartland of the Germanic tribes. A film about the expedition was shown in German cinemas and had been hugely popular. During their meeting, Himmler promised Bose that he would protect the Indian Legion. They parted on good terms. The following day, Bose returned to Berlin. For Amelia, these were anxious times. She was several months pregnant.
She certainly was not very happy, I'm sure. But I think she always accepted that his love for India came first, and any personal kind of responsibility or affection would have to be in second or third place. I doubt that she argued with him to do anything different, because it certainly would not have had any effect.
In November, Emilia gave birth to a baby girl, Anita. 3 months later, Bose's time of waiting came to an end. He boarded the German submarine U-180 and quietly slipped away, leaving behind his wife and daughter. To avoid being detected by British destroyers in the English Channel, Bose's U-boat was heading for the icy waters north of Scotland. Billy Carnut was one of the German submarine's torpedo engineers.
It was our great fortune that there was a storm with wind force 12. No patrol boats could last in the area, and aeroplanes couldn't take off either. At the same time, the thermometer dropped to about -10 degrees Celsius. It was so cold that our deck gun turned into a gigantic block of ice. Mr. Bose and Mr. Hassan fared extremely poorly in the rough sea. They spent most of the time in their berths. They were green and yellow. They almost changed color.
verschwand ja ganz heimlich. Und es durfte
He
niemand
disappeared secretly, and no one was allowed to say where he had actually gone or where he was.
Das war der Grund.
That was why our soldiers felt abandoned.
Im Stich gelassen.
Bose was no longer there.
Bose war nicht mehr da. Es war eigentlich
It was actually a happy time. We had a special status,
Sonderstellung.
and that saved our lives.
Das Leben bewahrt.
Meanwhile, Bose's U-boat headed for the Indian Ocean. He was to be transferred to a Japanese submarine that would take the Netaji all the way to Japan.
Bose hat sich schrecklich gefürchtet.
Bose was terrified. He absolutely refused to get into the Japanese dinghy because when he saw it, he realized he would be in water up to his backside. Even after trying to persuade him, he wouldn't go. So we had to prepare our dinghy, which had a solid bottom. And in the end, it was us pushing him rather than him going. All around us there were triangular fins, a sign that there were sharks nearby.
The Japanese submarine managed to carry Bose all the way to Southeast Asia. From there, he boarded a flight to Tokyo.
We are now living in a period.
Addressing the Japanese government, Bose was elated.
Within the ranks of the Indian National Congress, you see today.
Bose now proceeded to Singapore. He received a hero's welcome by thousands of Indian volunteers, members of the Indian National Army under Japanese command. They were ready to fight the British, but had lacked a charismatic Indian leader.
Netaji is there. My dream was realized, and I was quite sure that Netaji will get India freedom. And our whole army, there were more than 50,000 Indians. We were ready to sacrifice ourselves, but get India independent.
Bose told his followers that together with the Japanese, an attack on British India had every chance of success.
Subhas Bose said, as soon as we get into India, hundreds of thousands of people will rise up and fight against the British.
A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people, and to the still larger cause of humanity.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to light and freedom. With those words, on the eve of August 15, 1947, newly appointed Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru signaled the beginning of a new India. After almost 200 years of oppressive British rule, India is free. The dominion of Pakistan has been demarcated for Muslims, while India is a secular state with a Hindu majority. An unprecedented mass migration has begun as millions of people make their way across borders, a consequence of a century-long British strategy of divide and rule. Riots and violent outbreaks have erupted across the country. People are fleeing for their lives. Bloody trains arrive to their destinations as homes are torched across the country. To understand how all this began, we must go back to a pivotal moment in the Indian struggle for independence, back in 1942.
Over the course of the Pacific War, the Empire of Japan and the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere occupied territories across half the world. The flag of the rising sun was flown all the way to India, China, the Dutch East Indies, and everywhere in between. With the surrender of the Allied nations, the last elements of resistance in these territories were crushed by the Imperial Japanese Army. But to maintain control and consolidate their conquered peoples under imperial rule, the empire turned to the Kempeitai. Roughly analogous to the military police utilized by the former Western powers, the Kempeitai was first established in 1881. While initially modeled on the National Gendarmerie of France, its military, executive, judicial, and police functions were continually amended and broadened as the empire pursued expansionist policies. Its role became clear in 1907 with the occupation and later annexation of Korea, in which Kempeitai forces assisted in preserving the peace and suppressing anti-Japanese sentiment. During the border skirmishes of the 1920s and 30s, in which many foreign territories fell under Japanese military occupation, the Kempeitai began recruiting a large number of locals to serve as auxiliaries. By the height of the Second World War, it had expanded to tens of thousands of officers stationed across the empire. Kempeitai agents formed valuable connections with the German Abwehr and Italian Servizio Informazioni Militare. Mutual points of contact, such as the Penang submarine base in former British Malaya, allowed for technological and information exchanges.
200 years of imperial history were destroyed. Asians never looked at the British in the same way again. The British Navy had failed. The British Army had been outfought. White men had panicked and surrendered to an army of Asians. The Japanese continued their advance, invading Burma, fighting on the very borders of India. The Japanese brought a message of liberation to the native peoples of the British Empire. Many of the Indian troops captured by Japan went over to the Japanese side to fight as the Indian National Army for Indian independence.
So long as Anglo-American imperialism is not overthrown, India has no hope of achieving her liberty. We are therefore determined to fight shoulder to shoulder with you, no matter how long and hard the struggle may be, and no matter what the suffering and the sacrifice involved may prove to be. Your names will go down in history, not merely as the makers of a new not merely as the makers of a new East Asia, not merely as the makers of a new Asia, but as the makers and architects of a new world.
めでたき生徒に登れるところの第一歩に当たります。諸君と共に正常の万歳を心の底から賛唱いたしたいと思います。天皇陛下万歳。敵は念じ入れざる朝敵ぞ敵の対象たる者は古今無双の英雄でこれに従うつわものは共に共感決死をし記事に恥じぬゆあるも天の許さぬ反逆を残せし者は昔より栄えしため
अब आजादी की लड़ाई को अंजाम तक पहुंचाने के लिए महात्मा गांधी ने भारत छोड़ो आंदोलन की घोषणा की। उन्होंने देश की जनता को एक महामंत्र दिया, करो या मरो। इस आह्वान के कुछ घंटों बाद ही सरकार ने गांधी जी को, नेहरू जी को, अबुल कलाम आजाद सहित प्रमुख कांग्रेसी नेताओं को गिरफ्तार कर लिया और तब दूसरी पंक्ति के स्थानीय नेताओं ने आंदोलन की कमान संभाल ली।
Calling on 42.34 meters from somewhere in India.
भारत छोड़ो आंदोलन एक निर्णायक बिंदु था। इस आंदोलन में पूरा देश कूद पड़ा। पुलिस थानों, कचहरियों, रेलवे स्टेशनों और अंग्रेजी सत्ता के दूसरे प्रतीकों पर कब्जा कर उन पर तिरंगा फहराया जाने लगा। बौखलाई सरकार ने न सिर्फ लोगों के साथ मारापीटी की, न सिर्फ भारी संख्या में लोगों की गिरफ्तारियां हुई, बल्कि कई बार तो फौजी हवाई जहाज से निहत्थे लोगों पर गोलियां तक बरसाई।
大東亜結集国民大会は帝都日比谷公園において挙行され、寒湖のうちに東條首相登壇。
いよいよこの行動の使命に徹し、一丁同の信念のもと、その総力を凝集して、あくまでも大東亜戦争を完遂し、再び大東亜において前衛の統領幕府を許さに、もって世界新秩序の建設に協力せんことを期し、決議。いよいよ
大東亜各国代表の挨拶にいる。
全面连成钢铁一般的人格，东亚也具有了钢铁一般的万里长城。我对于
王代表の熱弁に率いる中国留学生。
祝大东亚战争的胜利，在东亚公民建设的成功。ประเทศไทยฉันขออาราธนาคุณพระศรีรัตนตรัยจงดลบันดาลให้กองทัพของสมเด็จพระจักรพรรดิญี่ปุ่นประสบชัยชนะถึงที่สุดและให้จักรวรรดิญี่ปุ่นมีความเจริญยิ่งขึ้นสืบไปเถิด本日议政会以议政会共同triển開國民大會之際，對侵犯日本國民各位多數議員表現了衷心輕快。That the Philippines no longer will return to that period of political and economic slavery, but will join with the other peoples of Greater East Asia in the hope that all the peoples of Greater East Asia will enjoy the common prosperity, the common blessings of life, the common tradition, and the common heritage of Asia
which has always been the cradle of human civilization. I thank you. I stand here before you as a soldier from the Western front line of the present Great East Asiatic War. I am speaking to you today like a soldier, giving you a message, a soldier's message from the Western front line in Asia. Sisters and brothers of Nippon, allow me first of all to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the exceedingly warm and cordial welcome you have given us this morning.
また名邦ドイツ代表もこれに加わり、道義一つに結ばれた参会者の戦意はいよいよ上がったのであります。
Eure Exzellenzen, meine Herren, die feierliche Kundgebung des heutigen Tages hat einen tiefen symbolischen Sinn. Sie vereinigt führende Staatsmänner des japanischen Kaiserreiches und der anderen Staaten
At the beginning of 1944, the Indian National Army joined the Japanese advance towards India.
The Japanese generals and officers had a lot of respect for Bose. And some of them said to me privately, there is no person in the war who more fully fit the ideal of a samurai than Subhas Chandra Bose.
Subhas Chandra Bose was actually desperate somehow to get into Bengal, perhaps reach Calcutta, because he felt that then there would in fact be a big civilian uprising in India, and his Indian National Army was simply meant to be a catalyst for a much larger civilian uprising inside the country.
अंग्रेजी अत्याचार के प्रतिघात में नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस के नेतृत्व में उन्हीं दिनों जापान, मलय और बर्मा में आजाद हिंद फौज के झंडे तले एक प्रखर सैन्य मुहिम जारी थी। कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, कौम में तू हिंद आगे बढ़, तू कभी न डर, आगे दुश्मनों का सर, वतन बढ़ाए जा। द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध में जापान की हार के बाद आजाद हिंद फौज का विघटन हो गया और इसके साथ ही ये सपना यहीं अधूरा रह गया।
In March 1944, Japanese and INA forces went on the offensive. The Japanese expected an easy victory, just like in 1942. But this time, the British were ahead of the game.
The Japanese had one of their worst defeats in the war, and the Indian National Army, recreated by Subhas Bose from the original Indian National Army, was just massacred.
Newly released documents show that a double agent, codenamed Silver, had given the British advance knowledge of the Japanese attack. His real name was Bhagat Ram Talwar. An insider, he'd received the information from the unsuspecting Netaji himself. Bose had believed that the Indian troops fighting for the British would surrender to the advancing INA. Instead, it was Bose's forces who were surrendering to the Allies.
There are defeats on the road to victory. That this is a big setback, but the cause of Indian freedom continues in some other way. I think that he understands that this is going to have a propaganda effect in India.
After the war, the British would put 3 generals of the Indian National Army on trial in the Red Fort in Delhi.
One was a Muslim, Shahnawaz Khan. Another was a Hindu, P.K. Saigal. And another was a Sikh, Guru Baksh Singh Dhillon. Suddenly there was this Muslim, Sikh, all together in it.
The INA trial would cause a nationwide outcry.
The political miscalculation by the British is so enormous to give publicity to the actions which Indians are going to see as patriotic, to give them enormous publicity, just a stupefying mistake by the British and General Auchinleck. Anyway, they're put on trial, they're convicted, treason against the king, emperor, they're sentenced to transportation for life, that is life imprisonment, and then they're released. I mean, the demonstrations in India on behalf of the Indian National Army and the knowledge that was coming out about the struggle of this army of Subhas Bose to fight with the Japanese for the liberation from the British Empire gets out after the war, and they're now considered heroes and martyrs.
But even a non-violent struggle demands an army, an organization, and a machinery.
12 months before the trials, on the 18th of August 1945, 3 days after Japan's surrender to the Allies, Bose was still full of confidence about his political future. He decided to fly to Manchuria and surrender to the forces of the Soviet Union and continue his struggle for Indian independence.
I think Subhas would have gotten fantastic admiration after independence, and I think he could have been a cabinet minister, he could have been a leader of a very important opposition socialist party, but he would have had a very important role to play. He was a relatively young man, he was 48 years old.
But the plane was overloaded. After a stopover in Japanese-occupied Formosa, it developed engine trouble. According to witnesses, the plane crashed. Bose died as a result of severe burns. He was cremated, and his remains were sent to a Buddhist temple in Japan, where they're still kept today.
The first was a shock. After all, when you suddenly hear the news of the death of a very near one, you are shocked. You are deeply grieved.
News of Bose's death was broadcast around the world. Eventually, it reached his widow, Emilia, in Vienna.
After she got the news of my father's death, she was really devastated, evidently. She said that I really wanted to end life, but it's my child that caused me to cling. So I think it was a very difficult thing, but she was rather strong in the sense of sort of dealing with it and also not constantly complaining about it.
But not everyone believed that the Netaji died in 1945. Some suggested that he'd made it to the Soviet Union, where he was locked up in a labor camp. Others believed Bose escaped altogether.
When we heard about the plane crash and he died, we who knew that this sort of fake news has been broadcasted many times, and this may be one of the tricks.
Even today, the question of Bose's death or disappearance in 1945 divides the people of India. Recently, an official commission appointed by the Indian government presented the findings of a 6-year investigation into Bose's death. Chaired by a former High Court judge, the Mukherjee Commission's findings shocked the nation.
He was such a beloved leader of the country, the people must know about what happened ultimately. My findings are, so to speak, is partial, in the sense that I have only said the earlier findings of his death is not correct, the ashes are not his.
The Commission's findings are highly sensitive. If Bose didn't die in the plane crash, why did he never reappear in public? He could have played a major role before and after Indian independence in 1947. According to the most popular conspiracy theory, India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, knew that Bose hadn't died in a plane crash.
Some elements are that Bose was in a Soviet prison and he lived there for decades even, and Nehru did everything to convince Stalin that Bose should stay in that prison, not be allowed to come back. It was in Nehru's interest that Bose did not reappear in independent India. It must be Nehru's doing. There is no proof for that, but it's interesting that these conspiracy theories, even when in 1997 there was Bose's 100th birthday, still some conspiracy theories were very much alive.
Anita Pfaff has always believed in the official version of events. She's also argued that a DNA test of Bose's remains is unnecessary. She's now changed her mind on the test.
As a consequence of the report of the last inquiry commission, I have written to the priest of Renkochi temple asking him to agree to providing bone samples for a DNA test. What I've heard is that he would want to have an okay of the Indian and the Japanese government, and I hope we will eventually get the government to stop dilly-dallying and agree to having this test done, and then see what the results are.
Subhas Chandra Bose, India's most controversial nationalist. 6 decades after his death or disappearance, Bose still has the power to electrify the nation.
My father was always a mystery man, it seems, and he has left us with a couple of mysteries which stay with us, and the circumstances of his death are certainly one important issue.
Netaji, Netaji.
Unlimited courage, a man with a distant vision, a man who felt for the millions of people of India.
For many Indians, Subhas Chandra Bose has a unique place in history. He was the only nationalist leader who confronted the British Empire on the battlefield.
As the end of World War II arrives, stricken by lack of supplies and the fall of Japan, the Indian National Army of Subhas Chandra Bose surrenders to the British Indian Army in Singapore. By now, Bose has become the greatest cult icon of Indian freedom, a leader who has successfully bruised the British rule while Congress kept on begging for independence. Claude Auchinleck, the Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army, holds public trials of INA commanders at the Red Fort, a measure to discipline the Indian Army and incriminate the INA for treachery and waging war against the Empire. Hopefully, this could turn the mass sentiments against Bose and his call for armed rebellion. February 1946, Mumbai. The Red Fort trial backfires. The Royal Indian Navy revolts against the Empire. The armed forces mutiny spreads like wildfire from Calcutta to Karachi, severely paralyzing the British state's capacity to contain a revolution. Violent confrontations, mass rallies, and riots paint the streets of India. The writing on the wall is clear. Time has come for the British to leave India. Sensing the threat to their lives, secret orders of immediate evacuation reach every Englishman. A silent mass exodus to England begins. The British agree to transfer power as soon as possible, and Indian freedom arrives sooner than expected. But sadly, in 1947, Bose was not home to celebrate. News of his death in a plane crash in Taiwan had spread throughout as planned, while Bose, in reality, had escaped to Russia. Nehru had come to know the secret, which he leaked to Clement Attlee, the then Prime Minister of Britain. Attlee eventually succeeded in influencing Stalin to banish Netaji to the cold shadows of Siberian labor camps, where his trail would vanish forever in anonymity. The INA soldiers who gave their everything for the motherland were shamelessly denied the status of freedom fighters by the Congress. Post-1947, political giants of the Congress Party conspired with the communists to repaint Indian freedom struggle. Gandhi and Nehru were placed on hollow pedestals, while Bose, Savarkar, and 100 others were wiped out. This laid the breeding ground of dirty appeasement politics, divisive designs, and larger-than-life propaganda, which would benefit a power-hungry family as recently as 2014. If Bose had been present, we would have a different India today. But destiny had other plans. Nehru benefited from the turn of events, rode the wave of public sentiments after Gandhi's mysterious death, becoming India's first Prime Minister. The life and time of Subhas Chandra Bose had been a brilliant bolt of visionary nationalism. But while the dream of an independent Hind had come true, the man who gave us our freedom lay freezing in a Siberian labor camp, perishing bit by bit, waiting hopefully for a rescue that would never come, thinking of the betrayals of his own, knowing that soon his countrymen will forget him.
Scendiamo in campo contro le democrazie plutocratiche e reazionarie dell'Occidente. Popolo italiano, corri alle armi!
母の大地へいざやゆはんいざ祖国目指して行け行けデリーへ母の大地へいざやゆはんいざ祖国目指して新軍の歌は今と高鳴る我らの勇姿をまた切り上げていや翻るよ独立の旗行け行けデリーへ母の大地へいざやゆかんいざ祖国